Hey guys! Tonight we walk barefoot across cool river stone as the Nile exhales mist at dawn. And you, yes you, are about to try surviving a Nubian workday measured not by clocks, but by shadows. The quarry is already awake. You feel grit under your heels, hear the low cough of stone on stone, and smell wet rope drying in the sun. Somewhere a hammer taps, patient as a heartbeat. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dramatic, but because the math never stops and the sun never negotiates. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly soothing to imagine this story drifting across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand where the river bends, watching quarrymen choose blocks with the calm confidence of people who know stone the way you know your phone's lock screen, by touch. This is a mainstream fact you can hang your hat on. Nubian sandstone from the Nile Valley traveled far, prized for its warmth and workability, feeding temples and monuments up and down the river. You help roll a block onto a wooden sledge, and immediately the day's arithmetic begins. Ropes are knotted at regular intervals, feet pace out lengths, forearms become units. It's body math, no tablets, no chalkboards, just repeatable measures agreed upon by everyone who wants to go home with all their fingers. A quiet joke floats by. Someone claims the stone listens better if you whisper to it. You laugh, then lower your voice anyway, because the quarry feels like a room with good acoustics. Here's a quirky tidbit to keep you awake for exactly 3 seconds. Some workers rubbed a slurry of water and fine sand under sledges to reduce friction, a trick so effective it looks like magic when the block glides. Remember that. It'll matter later when silence becomes a design goal rather than a happy accident. As the sun climbs, shadows shorten, and the foreman calls a pause by pointing, not shouting. The measurement of time is visual. You learn to read it. When the shadow of the pole kisses the knot, you lift. When it slips past, you rest. Historians still argue whether these shadow schedules were standardized across Nubia or negotiated site by site, but standing here, you don't care. The rhythm works. It keeps tempers cool and backs unbroken, mostly. Like joke number 2, your modern smartwatch would be useless here, except maybe as a shiny distraction. Heat presses in. You sip water sparingly because hauling it is also math. Distances are counted. Jars tallied, breaks earned. The quiet isn't silence, it's controlled sound. Stone rasp, rope hiss, sandal scuff, nothing wasted. You begin to understand why later rooms feel hushed. Quiet starts here, long before walls exist. By noon, you're already tired, which is the point. The system is humane in its own severe way. Another fact slips in with your breath. Skilled carvers trained for years, often within families, passing ratios and hand feel down like lullabies. A final aside, gentle as the breeze off the water, historians still argue whether Nubian methods influenced neighboring regions more than surviving records admit. You glance at the river, carrying stone and secrets alike, and step forward as the shadow reaches the next knot. The sledge lurches, then settles into a steady glide, and you discover that calm can be engineered. The path from quarry to temple is not a road so much as a solved equation. This is a mainstream fact you can test with your sore shoulders. Blocks moved on wooden sledges, hauled by teams whose spacing mattered as much as their strength. You take your place at the rope, noticing the knots again, those quiet little commas in a sentence of distance. Each knot means everyone leans together, breath sinking, because uneven poles crack stone and patience alike. Numbers are everywhere without ever showing their faces. The foreman doesn't count aloud, he watches the line. When the rope bows just right, you pull. When it straightens, you stop. Right angles appear from nothing, a carpenter's square cut from wood, a plumb line swaying like a pendulum that refuses to hurry. You learn to square a corner by sighting along a taut cord, checking the diagonals until they agree. That agreement is peace. Light joke, it's couples therapy, but for geometry. Here's a quirky tidbit to file away with the sand slurry trick you remembered earlier. Some crews used simple sighting frames, 2 sticks tied together, to align long corridors. It looks laughably basic, and then you walk the line and realize it's dead straight. The temple plan emerges in chalkless gestures. Measurements are shared knowledge, not secrets, because mistakes echo. You're building rooms meant to hold quiet, so you avoid clatter now. Even the jokes are murmured. Someone claims the plumb line listens too. It sways differently if you insult it. You apologize to the string anyway. As walls rise, ratios rule. Doorways narrow, then narrow again. Thickness grows with height, a stone lesson in gravity that keeps sound from wandering. This is another mainstream fact. Massive walls and limited openings dampen noise naturally. You feel it when you step inside a half-finished chamber. The outside world softens as if wrapped in cloth. Historians still argue whether such acoustic calm was an explicit goal or a fortunate byproduct of structural prudence, but your ears vote immediately. You pace a floor, counting steps heel to toe, then check the diagonals. They match. The room feels settled, like a held breath released. A debate hums beneath the work. Were proportions guided by fixed canons or by experienced improvisation? Historians still argue whether Nubian builders followed strict numerical ratios or flexible rules learned through apprenticeship. Standing here, you suspect both. The math is firm enough to trust, loose enough to breathe. A small comedy breaks the focus. Someone drops a pebble, and everyone freezes, listening to the echo bounce once, twice, then vanish. Approval ripples. Second light joke. You've just invented a very serious game of temple Marco Polo. The pebble test becomes routine, not loud, just informative. You adjust to wall thickness by a hand's breadth, shave a corner, and try again. Better. As afternoon leans on, you realize the route from quarry to sanctuary is a corridor of decisions, each one quieter than the last. The sledges arrive, the ropes slacken, and the numbers retreat into muscle memory. You rub your palms, thinking of how silence isn't empty here. It's measured, stacked, and earned. When the sun dips, shadows lengthen again, and the same pole that told you when to rest now tells you where to place the final block of the day. The math closes like a door that doesn't slam.
You step fully inside now, and the world obliges by lowering its voice. The air feels thicker, cooler, as if the room has learned how to listen. This is where building quiet becomes an art. A mainstream fact slides into place as naturally as the last block. Thick stone walls, narrow entrances, and staggered corridors reduce reverberation, softening footsteps and swallowing chatter. You test it with a cough you try to hide. The sound barely travels, and you pretend that was on purpose. Light enters politely, never barging in. Slits and clerestories lift brightness upward, leaving the floor in a calm dusk that keeps eyes relaxed and tempers even. You notice how ceilings hover just high enough to breathe, but not so high they invite echoes. It's math again, height to width, opening to wall, translated into feeling. Historians still argue whether these proportions were tuned for ritual acoustics or simply evolved from structural needs, but your ears don't care about footnotes. They're already resting. Here's a quirky tidbit to tuck into your pocket. Builders sometimes tested rooms with humming rather than shouting because sustained tones reveal lingering echoes better than sharp sounds. You hum, low and steady, and the note settles quickly, like dust after sweeping. Light joke? Congratulations, you've joined an ancient a cappella group with very strict membership requirements. The hum becomes a tool, not a performance. Someone nods. The wall gets a little thicker. You walk the corridor and feel the bend, never a straight sprint from outside to inside. Each turn sheds sound like a coat. The floor slopes ever so slightly, guiding feet and water, discouraging puddles and the slap-slap they make when stepped in. A debate drifts by with the incense. Historians still argue whether such microslopes were standardized or improvised by master builders responding to site conditions. You imagine a foreman saying, "1 finger lower," and that being enough. Chants enter the picture, carefully, not loud, not fast. The room holds them without throwing them back. This is another mainstream fact. Enclosed stone spaces can enhance low-frequency resonance while dampening higher, sharper sounds. You feel it in your chest more than your ears. A fringe story circulates. Someone claims certain stones were chosen because they liked voices. It's poetic nonsense, probably, but you run your hand over the wall anyway. It's warm, cooperative. You remember the sand slurry under the sledges from earlier, and it clicks. Friction managed outside becomes calm inside. The same thinking applies here. Surfaces are smoothed where hands pass, left rough where no one touches. Roughness eats sound. Smoothness invites it to linger politely. Second light joke, even the walls have manners. As dusk approaches, oil lamps flicker, and the room absorbs their tiny pops. You notice how silence here isn't empty, it's layered. Footsteps arrive softened, voices arrive rounded, thoughts arrive unhurried. Historians still argue whether this atmosphere was intended to induce contemplation or simply emerged from durable construction choices meant to last centuries. You sit against the wall and let the argument pass you by. Outside, the river murmurs, but it reaches you as a suggestion, not a demand. Inside, the temple teaches your body a new tempo. Breathing slows, shoulders drop. The math has done its quiet work. You stand, then pause, because even standing feels different here. Balanced, centered, as if the room has counted you and found you acceptable.
You wake before the sun again, not because anyone shouts, but because the camp exhales and you inhale with it. Lives move like the river here, passing skills along in gentle currents. This is a mainstream fact you can feel in your hands. Stone carving knowledge traveled through families and apprenticeships with techniques refined over years, not manuals. A father shows a daughter how to listen to the chisel. An uncle corrects wrist angle with a tap that says more than words. You try it, and the stone answers honestly. Too fast, it complains. Too slow, it yawns. Humor keeps the edge off. Someone nicknames a stubborn block the philosopher because it refuses to be rushed. Like joke, it's already tenure track. Breaks are measured like everything else, by shadows and thirst, so no one steals time and no one is cheated of it. Songs mark the rhythm, work songs that rise and fall without demanding applause. Historians still argue whether these songs carried encoded instructions or were simply morale boosters, but either way, your hands move better when the chorus hits. Here's a quirky tidbit that slips through the dust. Some carvers kept small personal marks, tiny notches or symbols on hidden faces of stones, a quiet signature that didn't interrupt the whole. It's not graffiti, it's presence. You add nothing, respecting the rule, but you notice the care in places no visitor will ever see. That care is the innovation. Another mainstream fact follows. Nubian craftsmen influenced styles beyond their borders, with techniques and aesthetics flowing north along the Nile. The stone remembers even when records don't. Rules are gentle but firm. Tools are shared, not hoarded. A chisel left out of place earns a look, not a lash. Mild punishments exist, extra hauling, a longer watch, because order protects everyone's fingers.
Historians still argue whether such discipline was centrally enforced or negotiated within crews, but the effect is the same. Calm persists. Remember the pebble echo test from earlier? It becomes a joke and a check, a way to reset the room after laughter drifts too far. You learn forgotten innovations by watching, not asking. A carver angles a cut so flakes fall away from the finished face, saving hours of smoothing. Another uses a wet cloth to reveal high spots by darkening the stone, a simple trick that feels like wizardry. Second light joke, congratulations, you've unlocked ancient stone Photoshop. These methods rarely make it into grand histories, but they keep temples quiet and walls true. As evening comes, tools are cleaned with care that borders on affection. The workday closes without a bell. The river takes the heat with it. You realize the math of quiet isn't only ratios and angles, it's social. Shared routines reduce friction. Predictability lowers volume. Historians still argue whether this culture was unique to Nubia or common across river societies, but you feel the local flavor in the jokes, the pauses, the way silence is respected without being worshipped. You lie back, thinking of how tomorrow will feel familiar without being dull. Stone dust settles. The camp hums at a pitch that won't carry far. You drift toward sleep, knowing the temple rises not just from numbers, but from people who learned how to work without raising their voices.
Night settles without announcement. The temple, finished at last, seems to exhale as heat slips back into the sand. You walk its perimeter by starlight, feeling how the stones hold the day like a memory they don't brag about. This is a mainstream fact worth resting on. Massive stone structures equalize temperature slowly, keeping interiors cool after sunset and warm before dawn. You lean against a wall and feel it, steady, patient, almost kind. Inside, lamps glow low. The quiet you helped build now works on you. Footsteps arrive padded, voices rounded, thoughts unknotted. The mathematics you practiced all these days, ratios, knots, shadows, has dissolved into atmosphere. Numbers have become feeling. Historians still argue whether builders consciously designed temples to induce calm, or whether calm emerged naturally from durability-first choices. But tonight, the argument doesn't echo. It barely whispers. Here's a final quirky tidbit delivered softly. Some sanctuaries were oriented to greet specific stars or seasonal light, letting a narrow beam travel slowly across a wall. You watch it happen. The beam moves like a finger tracing a remembered sum. Light joke. Even the cosmos checks its work twice. You sit where the light pauses and think of how time here is measured in patience, not urgency. You remember the river stones at dawn, the sand slurry under sledges, the pebble dropped to test an echo. All of it adds up to this: rooms that don't rush you, walls that don't argue. The lives behind the stone fade into the texture, the philosopher block, the plumb line that listened, the songs that steadied hands. Historians still argue whether such cohesion required strong authority or simply shared purpose, but the temple doesn't take sides. It just stands. You lie down where the floor slopes the tiniest amount, enough to guide rain away, enough to guide your breath down, too. The river murmurs from afar, arriving as a suggestion. The stars keep their distance. The quiet holds. Now the pacing eases further, words stretching like long shadows at dusk. You let your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench. The temple keeps watch so you don't have to. Stone counts your breaths for you, slow, even, forgiving if you miss one.
The math has retired for the night, leaving behind only balance. Imagine the carvers heading home, laughter thinning into the dark, tools resting in their places. Imagine the walls cooling, grain by grain, learning the night. The light beam slips away, lamps dim, the room grows rounder, softer, more generous with silence. If a thought drifts in, let it pass along the corridor and turn a corner until it can't find you anymore. Remember the way sound shed itself here, how each bend helped. Your mind can do that too. One turn, then another, until everything unnecessary stays outside. Breathing slows. The river's suggestion becomes a lullaby without notes. Stone holds you in a patient equation that always resolves. You are counted, measured, and found at rest. Stay here as long as you like. There's no bell to wake you.